She threw me in the dungeon, until she realized I was the one who rescued her daughter. The chains bit into Jake's wrists as the guards threw him against the stone wall. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and before he could recover, iron shackles clamped around his ankles. The dungeon reeked of mold and despair, a fitting welcome to the Crystalline Empire. "You dare enter our sacred city bearing weapons," the Empress hissed, her violet eyes blazing with fury. Queen Nalira stood before him in full battle regalia, her silver armor catching the torchlight. "Human filth. You will rot here until I decide your fate," Jake wanted to explain. He needed to tell her about the crashed ship, about the little girl he'd found in the wreckage 3 days ago, but the gag in his mouth prevented any words from escaping. The Empress turned on her heel, her cape swirling dramatically as she left him in darkness. 20 hours earlier, Jake had been conducting a routine geological survey on the planet's northern continent when his scanner picked up unusual energy signatures. The crashed vessel had torn a massive scar through the forest, and he'd approached with caution. What he found changed everything. The ship was alien in design, elegant curves and crystalline structures that seemed to grow rather than being manufactured. Inside, among the wreckage and the bodies of what appeared to be royal guards, a small girl lay unconscious. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, her skin bearing the same faint luminescence as the Empire's people. Jake had worked frantically to stabilize her injuries. His medical training was basic, designed for emergencies in deep space mining operations, but he did what he could. The girl had a fractured arm and severe dehydration. He'd set the bone, administered fluids, and carried her through 50 miles of hostile terrain to reach the capital city. The journey had been hell. Predators stalked them through the crimson forests. Jake had been forced to use his plasma rifle twice, each discharge a beacon announcing their presence. He barely slept, keeping watch over the unconscious child, praying she would survive. When the crystalline spires of the capital finally appeared on the horizon, relief had flooded through him. He'd radioed ahead, trying to explain the situation, but the response had been immediate and violent. Atmospheric fighters screamed overhead. Ground forces surrounded him within minutes. They'd ripped the girl from his arms before he could say a word. An officer had struck him across the face with enough force to split his lip. Then came the chains, the accusations, the Empress herself appearing to pass judgment on the human who had dared approach their city armed. Now, in the suffocating darkness of the dungeon, Jake could only hope someone would check on the girl. Would they realize she'd been in a crash? Would they understand he'd saved her life, not endangered it? The questions circled endlessly in his mind as exhaustion finally claimed him. Above, in the palace medical wing, Princess Lysa opened her eyes for the first time in 3 days. Her mother sat beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. The Empress had been searching for her daughter for 72 hours, ever since the royal transport vanished during a diplomatic mission. "Mama," Lysa whispered, her voice weak, "where is the nice man? The one who carried me? He saved me from the fire. He gave me water when I was so thirsty." The Empress froze, her blood turning to ice. "What man, my darling? What are you talking about?" "The human," Lysa said, confusion crossing her small features. "The one your soldiers took away. I tried to tell him, but I was too tired. He fixed my arm. He protected me from the scary animals. Is he here? I want to thank him." Queen Nalira's face drained of all color as the horrifying realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. The palace erupted into chaos within seconds of the Empress's scream. Guards scrambled in every direction as Queen Nalira ran through the corridors, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd condemned an innocent man. Worse than innocent. A hero who had saved her daughter's life while she'd been tearing apart the countryside in a desperate search. The dungeon master nearly fell over himself trying to unlock the heavy iron door. "Your Majesty, I don't understand." "You ordered him placed in the maximum security cell. We followed protocol exactly." "Just open it," Nalira commanded, her voice shaking. Behind her, the royal physician carried Princess Lysa, wrapped in blankets. The girl had insisted on coming despite her injuries, her eyes wide with worry for the man who had saved her. The door swung open with a groan of ancient hinges. The cell beyond was pitch black, the air thick and stale. A torch was brought forward, illuminating the cramped space. Jake sat against the far wall, his head hanging forward, dried blood crusting the side of his face where he'd been struck during his arrest. "Remove those chains immediately," the Empress ordered, her voice cracking. The guards rushed forward, fumbling with keys. Jake lifted his head slowly, squinting against the sudden light. His eyes were dull with exhaustion and pain, but when he saw Lysa in the physician's arms, relief flooded his features. "You're okay," he rasped, his voice rough from hours of silence. "Thank God. I was so worried they wouldn't get you medical attention fast enough. Lysa burst into tears. I'm sorry. I tried to tell them you helped me, but I was too sleepy. They hurt you because of me. The shackles fell away, and Jake rubbed his raw wrists. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled from being locked in one position for so long. 2 guards caught him before he hit the ground. The Empress stepped forward, and Jake saw the anguish in her violet eyes. I have made a terrible mistake, Nalira said, her voice barely above a whisper. I accused you. I imprisoned you. I didn't even give you a chance to speak. You saved my daughter's life, and I repaid you with cruelty and injustice. Jake looked at her for a long moment, then at the little girl, who was reaching out toward him with her good arm. Despite everything, he felt the anger draining away. He'd been in her position before, desperate and afraid when someone he loved was in danger. You didn't know, he said simply. You thought I was a threat to your people. Any parent would have done the same to protect their child. No, the Empress said firmly. A parent, yes. But a queen should have sought the truth before passing judgment. I let fear and prejudice guide my hand. She stepped closer, meeting his eyes directly. My daughter told me everything. The crash, your care for her injuries, how you fought off predators to keep her safe. You could have left her in that wreckage. You could have called for our forces and waited at a safe distance. Instead, you risked your life. Jake shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at bruised muscles. It wasn't really a choice. She needed help. That's all that mattered. The royal physician had been examining Jake while they spoke, running a scanning device over his injuries. Contusions, lacerations, severe dehydration. Your Majesty, this man is in need of immediate medical care, and if I may say so, his treatment of the princess's injuries was remarkably skilled. He likely saved her life with his field medicine. Nalira nodded, then made a decision that would echo through history. Take him to the royal wing. He will receive the same care we give to members of the imperial family. And someone bring me the officers who struck him during his arrest. They will answer for harming a man who was trying to help us. Jake was helped to his feet and supported by guards who had been ready to torture him hours before. As they moved through the palace, word spread like wildfire. The human who had been arrested as a threat had actually saved the missing princess. Courtiers and servants lined the hallways, their expressions a mixture of shame and curiosity. Princess Lysa refused to be separated from Jake, insisting that she be treated in the same room. The medical wing became a flurry of activity as physicians worked on both patients. Jake's injuries were treated, his wounds cleaned and sealed with advanced medical technology far beyond anything available to humans. Why were you even on our planet? Nalira asked as she watched the treatment. She'd pulled up a chair between the 2 medical beds, unwilling to leave her daughter's side, but equally unwilling to let Jake out of her sight. There was so much she needed to understand. Jake explained about the mining survey, the routine nature of his mission. He described finding the crash site, the decision to help despite not knowing who the child was or what it might mean for human-alien relations. I've got a niece about her age back on Earth, he said quietly. Couldn't just leave her there. The Empress listened in silence, feeling the weight of her mistake growing heavier with every word. This man had acted with pure compassion, expecting nothing in return, and she'd nearly destroyed him for it. When the physicians finally stepped back, declaring both patients stable, she made another decision. Jake Martinez of Earth, she said formally, using his full name for the first time. I, Queen Nalira of the Crystalline Empire, hereby issue a formal apology for the injustice done to you. But words are insufficient. I wish to make amends in a meaningful way. What can I offer you? What would begin to balance the scales? Jake looked at her in surprise. I don't need anything, just knowing she's safe is enough. That is not acceptable, Nalira said, steel entering her voice. You will be compensated, if not for yourself, then for your people. The Crystalline Empire has been isolated for too long, viewing outsiders with suspicion and fear. You have shown me the error of that path. I would like to propose an alliance between our peoples. The words hung in the air, momentous and unexpected. Jake's eyes widened. I'm just a surveyor. I don't have the authority to negotiate something like that. Then I will speak with those who do, the Empress replied. But I want you involved in the process. You understand both sides now. You've seen the best and worst of my people in the span of a single day. Your perspective will be invaluable. Over the next several hours, communication channels were opened that had been closed for generations. Jake's company was contacted, then Earth's diplomatic corps, then the United Human Council itself. The story of the rescue spread rapidly, and with it came an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. But in the medical wing, Away from the politics and negotiations, a simpler connection was forming. Princess Lysa held Jake's hand as she drifted off to sleep, finally feeling safe. The Empress sat beside them both, keeping watch through the night as she had done so many times before with her daughter. But this time, she also watched over the man who had saved her child, silently vowing that she would never again let fear blind her to the truth. The dawn broke over the crystalline spires, painting them in shades of gold and amber. In the palace, wounds both physical and political were beginning to heal. The chains that had bound Jake now sat in a display case, not as a memorial to shame, but as a reminder of the cost of prejudice and the power of looking beyond first impressions. Queen Nalira stood at the window of the medical wing, watching the sunrise. Behind her, Jake was finally sleeping peacefully, his injuries treated and his strength slowly returning. Lysa slept in the bed beside him, her small hand still clutching the edge of his blanket as if afraid he might disappear. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of General Karis, the Empress's chief military advisor. The older woman's face was grave as she entered, carrying a data tablet. "Your Majesty, we've completed our analysis of the transport crash. You need to see this." Nalira took the tablet, her eyes scanning the technical readout. What she read made her blood run cold. Sabotage. Someone deliberately caused the crash. "Yes, Your Majesty." The navigation systems were compromised by a sophisticated virus. We believe it was an assassination attempt, likely by the Obsidian clans. They've been seeking to destabilize the Empire for years. If the princess had died in that crash, especially so far from the capital, it would have thrown us into chaos. The Empress's hands trembled with rage, and Jake stumbled into the middle of an assassination plot without knowing it. When he brought Lysa back, the conspirators must have assumed he was part of their plan gone wrong, or worse, that he was trying to rescue her to foil them. Karis nodded grimly. "We've intercepted communications suggesting that agents within the city were preparing to finish the job if the crash didn't kill her. They were likely watching when he arrived. Your immediate arrest of him probably saved his life. If he'd been free in the city, they would have eliminated him as a threat." It was a bitter irony. The imprisonment that had seemed so cruel might have actually protected Jake from assassins who would have killed him on sight. But that didn't change what Nalira had done or why she'd done it. Fear had driven her actions, not wisdom. "Double the security on this wing," she ordered, "and begin a quiet investigation. I want every person who had access to that transport identified. The people responsible for this will face justice." As Karis left to carry out her orders, Nalira returned to her vigil. The threat wasn't over. Somewhere in her empire, enemies lurked who wanted her daughter dead, and they now knew that a human had interfered with their plans. Jake's act of heroism had painted a target on his back. She needed to tell him. He deserved to know what he'd walked into. But as she looked at his sleeping form, battered and exhausted from his ordeal, she hesitated. He'd already been through so much. How could she ask him to face even more danger? The decision was taken from her when Jake's eyes opened. But he'd been trained to sleep light in dangerous territory, and some part of him had registered the tension in the room. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice still rough but clearer than before. Nalira met his gaze directly. She built her reputation on honesty, even when it was difficult. She wouldn't start lying now. The crash that injured Lysa wasn't an accident. Someone tried to kill her. And by saving her, you've likely made yourself a target as well. Jake processed this information with surprising calm. He sat up slowly, wincing at the lingering soreness in his muscles. "So what happens now?" "I assign you a full security detail," Nalira said. "You stay in the palace under protection while we root out the conspirators. Then, when it's safe, you return to your people with our eternal gratitude and the alliance I promised." "And if they try again?" Jake asked. "If they go after Lysa while I'm hiding behind guards?" The Empress hadn't expected that question. "You're not a soldier. This isn't your fight. Wasn't my fight yesterday either," Jake pointed out. "But I got involved anyway. Look, I'm not trying to be a hero. I just know that little girl over there trusts me. If there are people trying to hurt her, I'm not going to sit in a safe room while she's in danger." Nalira studied him for a long moment. She saw the determination in his eyes, the same stubborn compassion that had driven him to carry an injured child through 50 miles of wilderness. He meant every word. "You realize you could die. These are professional assassins, not forest predators." "I survived the predators," Jake said with a slight smile, "and I've got one advantage the assassins don't expect." "What's that?" "I'm not supposed to be here. I'm the random factor they couldn't plan for. That crash should have killed Lysa. Instead, I showed up, and changed everything. They're going to be off balance, trying to figure out who I am and what I represent. We can use that. The Empress felt a reluctant admiration growing. This human, this simple surveyor from a world her people had dismissed as primitive, was thinking like a strategic tactician. You have a plan. The beginning of one, Jake admitted. But I'll need your help, and I'll need to know everything about these Obsidian clans and why they want your daughter dead. Over the next hour, Nalira briefed Jake on the complex politics of the Crystalline Empire. The Obsidian clans controlled the mineral-rich southern territories and had long resented the authority of the imperial family. They'd been pushing for independence, and when diplomatic efforts failed, they'd apparently decided to eliminate the heir to the throne. If Lysa dies, the succession becomes unclear, Nalira explained. I have no other children. My sister could claim the throne, but she's married to an Obsidian lord. The Empire would effectively fall under their control without a single battle. Now, Jake absorbed this information, his mind working through the implications. They need to make it look like an accident or an attack by outsiders. That's why they used a virus instead of a bomb, and why my presence actually helps them. If they can frame this as a human conspiracy, it turns your people against mine and removes Lysa at the same time. Exactly, Nalira said, impressed by how quickly he'd grasped the situation. Which means keeping you alive and visible is actually a strategic necessity. If you die under suspicious circumstances, it supports their narrative, but if you remain safe and clearly allied with us, it undermines their story. A soft voice interrupted them. Is someone trying to hurt me again? Princess Lysa was awake, her eyes wide with fear. Both adults moved to her bedside immediately. You're safe, sweetheart, Nalira assured her daughter. Jake and I are going to make sure nothing bad happens to you. You'll stay? You won't leave me? Jake took her small hand gently. I'm not going anywhere, Princess. I promise. The Empress felt something shift inside her chest. This man, who owed them nothing, who had been brutalized by her own guards, was committing himself to protecting her daughter. Not for political gain or reward, but because a scared little girl needed him. In that moment, Nalira understood that she'd been given a rare gift, the chance to witness true nobility, not born of bloodlines or titles, but of character. And we work together, she said firmly. All three of us. We'll find these conspirators, we'll protect Lysa, and we'll show them that the Crystalline Empire cannot be brought down by cowards who target children. Jake nodded, and despite the pain, despite the danger, he felt a grim determination settling over him. He'd come to this planet to survey minerals. Instead, he'd found something far more valuable. Purpose. And he'd be damned if he was going to let anyone hurt this little girl who'd already been through so much. Outside the medical wing, assassins watched and waited, but they were about to learn a hard lesson. Humanity might not have the advanced technology of the Crystalline Empire. They might not have energy weapons or faster-than-light travel, but they had something the assassins hadn't counted on. They had the sheer stubborn refusal to abandon those who needed help, and in Jake Martinez, that human trait was about to become a very dangerous weapon. The next 48 hours were a careful dance of strategy and deception. Jake, despite his injuries, worked with General Karras and the Empress's intelligence officers to create a trap. They leaked false information through channels known to be compromised, suggesting that Jake was being prepared for immediate transport off-planet, that he was too injured and traumatized to remain in the capital. The bait was irresistible. If the human left before formal alliance talks could begin, the Obsidian clans would lose their chance to frame him as part of a conspiracy. They would have to act quickly, either to kill him before he left, or to capture him for a show trial that would paint all humans as enemies of the Empire. Jake insisted on being part of the operation despite Nalira's strong objections. They need to see me moving through the palace, he argued. If I'm hidden away, they'll know it's a trap. Let me be visible, vulnerable. Give them a target they can't resist. The Empress hated every word of it, but she couldn't deny the logic. So Jake walked the palace corridors with only a light security detail, apparently unaware that every step was being monitored by hidden guards and surveillance systems. He visited the gardens, spent time in the library, even took meals in the public dining halls where courtiers could see him. Princess Lysa remained in the medical wing under heavy guard, but she wasn't happy about it. I want to help too, she insisted during one of Jake's visits. They're doing this because of me. I should be brave, like you. You are brave, Jake told her gently. You survived a crash that killed trained warriors. You trusted a stranger to help you. That took incredible courage, but right now the bravest thing you can do is stay safe and let us handle this. Your mom needs to know you're protected. If she's worried about you, she can't focus on stopping the bad guys. It was the right argument for a 7-year-old who adored her mother. Lysa nodded seriously. Okay, But you have to promise to come back and tell me stories about Earth." "You promised." "I promise," Jake said, hoping it was a promise he could keep. On the third night, the assassins made their move. Jake was returning to his guest quarters, his security detail deliberately positioned at a distance as part of the plan. The corridor was empty, shadows deep between the light panels. He'd almost reached his door when he sensed movement behind him. Training and instinct took over. Jake dropped and rolled just as an energy blade sliced through the space where his head had been. He came up fast, his hand finding the small plasma pistol Karis had insisted he carry. Two figures in dark combat suits emerged from concealment, moving with lethal precision. Jake fired twice, forcing them to take cover. The shots went wide deliberately. This wasn't about killing them. It was about keeping them engaged until the trap could spring. He backed toward his quarters, making himself a retreating target, leading them exactly where he needed them to go. They took the bait. The assassins advanced, confident in their superiority. They'd trained for years in combat arts. This was just a human surveyor lucky to have survived this long. One of them raised a projectile weapon, aiming for Jake's leg. A crippling shot, not fatal. They wanted him alive for interrogation and propaganda. The shot never came. The corridor exploded with light as hidden panels slid back, revealing a full squad of Imperial guards. Stun nets deployed from the ceiling and walls, crackling with energy. Both assassins tried to escape, but they'd been boxed in perfectly. Within seconds, they were unconscious and restrained. General Karis emerged from a side passage, her expression satisfied. "Well, executed, Surveyor Martinez. They never suspected the trap until it was too late." Jake's hands were shaking now, that the adrenaline was fading. He'd been in danger before, but never like this. Never with trained killers hunting him. "Did we get what we needed?" "Their equipment will tell us plenty," Karis confirmed. "And they're alive for questioning. Your Majesty will be pleased." The Empress arrived, minutes later, her face tight with controlled fury. She looked Jake over carefully, checking for injuries despite knowing he was unhurt. "You took an unnecessary risk," she said, but there was relief in her voice rather than anger. "It worked, though," Jake pointed out. "And now you have them." The interrogation of the captured assassins took hours, but it yielded everything Nalira needed. They were indeed Obsidian clan operatives, and under enhanced questioning they revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. 3 high-ranking nobles, including the Empress's own sister, were implicated in the plot. The arrests were carried out swiftly and quietly in the dead of night. By dawn, the conspirators were in custody, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. The Obsidian clan's attempt to seize power had failed, and the Empire's unity was preserved. But there was still one more crucial step. The Empress called for a public assembly in the Grand Hall, an event broadcast across the entire Empire. Thousands gathered in person while millions more watched from their homes. Nalira stood before them in full imperial regalia, Princess Lysa at her side, recovered and healthy, and beside them both stood Jake Martinez, wearing simple Earth clothing, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the attention, but standing tall nonetheless. "My people," the Empress began, her voice carrying through the hall with perfect acoustics. "I stand before you today to speak a truth that shames me, but which must be shared. Days ago, I committed a grave injustice against an innocent man. This human, Jake Martinez, saved my daughter's life after an assassination attempt by traitors to the Empire. He carried her through 50 miles of dangerous territory, treated her injuries, and brought her safely home." The crowd murmured, shock rippling through the assembly. The story had been suppressed until now, but hearing it from the Empress herself gave it undeniable weight. "And how did I repay this heroism?" Nalira continued, her voice heavy with self-recrimination. "I had him beaten. I had him thrown into our darkest dungeon. I condemned him without trial, without even listening to his explanation. I let fear and prejudice guide my judgment, and I nearly destroyed an innocent man who deserved only our gratitude." She turned to face Jake directly, and the cameras captured every moment. "Jake Martinez, I apologize to you before my entire empire. I apologize for my cruelty, my blindness, and my failure to seek truth before passing judgment. You owed us nothing, yet you gave us everything. You saved my daughter. You exposed a conspiracy that threatened our empire. And even after all I did to you, you stayed to help us when you could have simply left." The Empress knelt, a gesture no ruler of the Crystalline Empire had made in 500 years. The crowd gasped collectively. "I ask your forgiveness, not because I deserve it, but because my people deserve to see their leader acknowledge her mistakes and seek to make them right." Jake stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the gesture and the attention. Then he stepped forward and gently helped the Empress back to her feet. "There's nothing to forgive," he said, his words carried through the hall by hidden microphones. "You're a mother who thought someone had hurt her child. I understand that. And if my being here helped save lives and stop bad people, then everything that happened was worth it." Princess Lysa couldn't contain herself any longer. She threw her arms around Jake's waist, hugging him tightly. The image of the small princess embracing the human who had saved her would become iconic, reproduced on everything from news feeds to historical archives. Nalira's voice strengthened as she addressed the crowd again. "Let this day mark a new beginning for the Crystalline Empire. We have lived in isolation for too long, viewing outsiders with suspicion and fear. This human showed us that heroism, compassion, and honor are not limited to our species. Therefore, I am formally proposing an alliance with humanity, with Jake Martinez serving as our first ambassador to Earth." The crowd erupted in cheers. The political implications would take months to fully work out, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the message. That prejudice could be overcome. That mistakes could be acknowledged and corrected. That even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Jake sat with Lysa, teaching her to skip stones across a crystalline pond. The girl's laughter rang out, pure and joyful, the sound of a child who felt safe again. Nalira watched from a distance, flanked by guards, but feeling more at peace than she had in years. General Karras stood beside her, a slight smile on the usually stern woman's face. "You know," Karras said quietly, "in all my years of service, I've never seen anyone handle a diplomatic crisis quite like that. Apologizing publicly, making yourself vulnerable. It was either brilliant or insane." "Perhaps both," Nalira admitted. "But it was necessary. My people needed to see that their leaders can be wrong and still be strong. That admitting mistakes doesn't diminish us, it elevates us. And the human? You're serious about making him an ambassador?" The Empress nodded. "He's perfect for it. He understands both our peoples now. He's seen us at our worst and still found compassion. And more importantly, both sides trust him. He's a bridge, when we desperately need one." "Does he know you're also hoping he'll stay close to Lysa?" Karras asked with a knowing look. "The girl has grown attached to him." Nalira's expression softened as she watched her daughter and Jake together. "He's been good for her. After everything she went through, she needs someone who makes her feel safe. Someone who proved he'd protect her no matter what." "And what about you?" the general pressed gently. "What do you need?" It was a bold question, but Karras had served Nalira since before she became Empress. She'd earned the right to ask. Nalira considered her answer carefully. "I need to be worthy of the trust my people place in me. I need to ensure that what happened to Jake never happens again to anyone. And I need to make certain that my daughter grows up in an empire that values truth and justice over fear and tradition." "Then you've chosen the right path," Karras said, "even if it's a difficult one." As the sun set over the crystalline spires, painting them in shades of violet and gold, Jake finished teaching Lysa his final stone-skipping technique. The little princess managed to get her stone to skip 3 times before it sank, and she squealed with delight. "I did it!" "Jake, did you see? I did it!" "You're a natural," Jake said with a genuine smile. "Pretty soon you'll be better at it than I am." Lysa's expression turned serious. "You won't leave, will you? Mama said you might have to go back to Earth." Jake had been dreading this conversation. The truth was complicated. He had a life on Earth, family and friends who were probably worried sick about him, but he also had a promise to keep, and a little girl who needed him. "I'll have to visit Earth eventually," he said carefully, "but I'll always come back, I promise." "Ambassadors travel between worlds. It's part of the job. So you'll really be our ambassador?" Lysa's eyes lit up. "That means you'll live here sometimes?" "If your mother approves the appointment, yes. And if Earth agrees to the alliance." "They will," Lysa said with absolute confidence. "'Cause you'll explain it to them. You're good at explaining things." The Empress approached then, her guards maintaining a respectful distance. She'd changed from her formal regalia into simpler robes, looking more like a mother than a monarch. "Lysa, it's time for your evening meal. The physicians want to make sure you're keeping up your strength." The princess made a face but didn't argue. She hugged Jake one more time before running off toward the palace, her guards falling into step around her. Nalira watched her daughter go, then turned to Jake. "She's right, you know." "You are good at explaining things. You managed to make a 7-year-old understand complex diplomatic concepts." Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just talked to her like a person, not a princess. Kids are smarter than most adults give them credit for." They walked together along the garden path, the evening air cool and pleasant. The tension that had existed between them just days ago had transformed into something else. Not quite friendship yet, but mutual respect tinged with the shared trauma they'd endured. "I meant what I said in the assembly," Nalira said after a moment, "about the ambassadorship. But I want you to understand what you'd be taking on. It won't be easy. There are still factions that oppose closer ties with humanity. You'll face resistance, possibly even danger." "Seems like I face danger pretty regularly these days," Jake said wryly. "At least as an ambassador, I'll have a security detail that's trying to protect me instead of arrest me." The Empress winced at the reminder. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that." "You don't have to," Jake said seriously. "Look, I won't pretend it didn't hurt. Being beaten and thrown in a dungeon when I was trying to help was pretty terrible. But I also understand you were terrified for Lysa. You thought I was a threat. Any parent would have reacted the same way. A parent, perhaps. But a queen should have done better, should have sought the truth." "Maybe," Jake acknowledged. "But you did seek the truth eventually. And when you found it, you didn't try to hide your mistake. You owned it publicly, in front of your entire empire. That takes more courage than most people have." They reached a bench overlooking the city below, lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. Nalira sat, and after a moment, Jake joined her. "Can I ask you something?" the Empress said. "Why did you stay? After we captured you, after everything we put you through, you could have demanded immediate transport back to Earth. Instead, you volunteered to help catch assassins. Why?" Jake thought about it. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Part of it was Lysa. I couldn't leave her knowing she was still in danger. But it was also about proving something, I think. Proving that humans aren't the primitive warmongers some species think we are. That we can be trusted. That we value life and justice. If I'd run away, it would have confirmed every negative stereotype about my people." "So you risked your life for politics?" "No," Jake said firmly. "I risked my life because it was the right thing to do. The political stuff is just a bonus." Nalira studied his profile in the fading light. This human continued to surprise her. He had every reason to be bitter, angry, demanding compensation and apologies. Instead, he spoke of doing the right thing as if it were the most natural choice in the universe. "Earth is fortunate to have citizens like you." "Earth has billions of citizens like me," Jake corrected. "We're not special. We just try to help when we can. It's human nature." As the stars began to appear overhead, different constellations than the ones Jake had grown up with, he thought about the path that had led him here. A routine survey mission had become something far greater. He'd saved a life, exposed a conspiracy, survived assassination attempts, and potentially helped forge an alliance between species. Not bad for a guy who'd just wanted to catalog mineral deposits. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, negotiations, and complications he couldn't even imagine yet. But sitting here in this alien garden on this foreign world with a queen who had become an unlikely ally, Jake felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Not just for himself, but for what humanity and the Crystalline Empire could accomplish together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be formal alliance talks, political maneuvering, and the complex process of building trust between species that had never truly interacted before. But tonight, there was peace. A little girl sleeping safely in the palace, protected by guards who would die before letting harm come to her. An empress learning that strength came not just from power, but from the courage to admit mistakes. And a human surveyor who had stumbled into history and somehow found his place in it. Jake looked up at the unfamiliar stars and smiled. He had a feeling his life was never going to be simple again, and surprisingly he was okay with that.